first person that's going to be joining us is the CEO of Tech4Covid, which was built remotely and has over 5,000 volunteers in just a couple of weeks. It's launched over 30 tech-based projects that help mitigate COVID-19 related challenges. And João is actually the CEO of Humanix, I hope I'm saying that right, a talent advisory, recruitment and training startup. And moderating this fireside chat today is Andre. He's a communications and community manager at Startup Portugal, a public-private think tank promoting entrepreneurship and meditating government ecosystem relating in Portugal. For over 8 years, Andre has been working with community and communications with a new focus for tech and entrepreneurship since joining the Startup Portugal ranks. So please give a big virtual standing ovation to João Figueirinhas Costa and Andre Forte.
Hi. Hi, João. Hi, Valentina. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Andre. And I think Valentina is gone.
Yeah, so let's start this. So, João, I think the first question, and despite Valentina I think Valentina said it really well, but I think the first question is exactly what is the Tech4Covid-19 movement and how did it start?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Andre. So Tech4Covid-19 is an informal and very organic movement that started roughly 7 weeks ago. From startup founders. So there's a few different kind of groups and communities that pre-existed COVID. We were just kind of, as soon as the whole COVID thing and lockdown chats and all of that kind of came through, we were basically trying to collaboratively think of what could we as startup founders kind of running our own businesses do to somehow mitigate these kind of COVID-related challenges and kind of support the community, generally speaking. So one thing kind of pulled the other, and we basically, from a WhatsApp informal conversation, kind of moved into a Slack group. And that Slack group started like 40, 50 people from the WhatsApp, and then kind of rapidly moved into a kind of 300-400 people. Typically, the first few people who joined, or the first couple of hundred people who joined, were employees and other startup founders and employees of kind of the startups that were already involved. But then it kind of week after week, day after day, actually, it just kind of blew up. So we're now just kind of a bit above 5,000 employees, volunteers, we're still rolling with quite a few projects.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that Tech4Covid started in Portugal before the state of emergency was issued by the government. Am I right?
Yes. So I think that kind of followed through the trend that we had in Portugal, which was I think everyone was fairly scared with what was happening with Spain and Italy, our neighbors, and just before we got hit more seriously, I think everyone was already kind of locking down themselves, everyone who could and was able to do that. So I think that this whole chatter basically started at that point as well.
Yeah, and we're talking about over 5,000 people, 27 ongoing projects, if I'm not incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
How many startups are involved in the Tech4Covid movement?
So there's hundreds of them. So various different companies, hundreds of different companies, a lot of freelancers, so a lot of unemployed people in the meantime, to be honest. So there's a lot of different volunteers and how it's structured and where people come from. We can never say like the exact number, but we should be a bit over 1,000 companies already involved, given that we have only a few people from each company.
Yeah, we're talking about something between 45 days that started, right? And how do you onboard newcomers? Because we're talking about redirecting a drive to help into creating meaningful projects and meaningful solutions. How do you onboard these people, and how do you manage their will to collaborate?
Yeah, so I guess that's $1 million question, right? So yeah, I mean, so people are free to join Slack and join the group, and that's very open, and we have no filter whatsoever in how volunteers join and connect. What we do is we ask everyone to kind of fill in a form. So it's a very basic type form with a few questions, but a lot of the questions are focusing on contacts and all of that. It's very much focused on skills and where they work and what type of experience they do in a very simplified version, so that we can at any point kind of understand who we have in the community. And I mean, just at a very high level of like very high level skill selection. So that's kind of the first thing, and that is a great tool. That is actually, it's a very simple but a very important tool for us right now in terms of allocating volunteers and kind of internal recruitment for volunteers and allocating them to different projects. So that's kind of the number one thing. Then, I mean, for whoever knows Slack or any kind of corporate messaging tool, I'd say that we just use channels and the announcements, kind of the general channel, and we just have very intense and regular and consistent kind of internal communication. It's not perfect, to be honest, but we're actually quite happy on how it's going. So we basically just have daily announcements where we do, so once or twice a day, we basically just give updates on specific things in the kind of internal organization or projects and kind of project updates. So we do that. We also do internal communication newsletters via email. So it's kind of a more traditional version, but we have all kinds of volunteers. Some are more like tech savvy, some are less. So we also use email to kind of complement information on kind of all of the updates we give. And then one of our kind of movement representatives, like myself, he publishes a weekly impact report, and that's very much into kind of numbers and impact numbers, generally speaking, on the whole, all of the different projects and the movement itself, like the more organizational component, number of volunteers and all that. And we just every week we publish that on Medium, and we share that internally as well and externally. So those are kind of a few of the initiatives that we are doing to kind of get people communicate within the community and kind of communicate to the volunteers everything that's going on. And in those communications and by providing a lot of information about the projects and all of that, that's the way that we kind of give them the right input for them to kind of self-select into projects or kind of pick what they're doing next. And this is it's one thing that is very important to mention, is that it is super kind of organic. It's not like we push people to do anything. It's pure volunteer based, pure kind of proactive and initiative based. We do have kind of internal organization teams that kind of support this moderation, and that's the other kind of part. So apart from all of this internal communication pieces, we have like shared services team type of thing. So internal recruitment, which is basically trying to do call outs for volunteers with specific skills that are required by specific projects. We have a PMO team, so a project management team that basically, because we have very different seniorities of people running projects and all of that, we did have the need to kind of support and mentor project leaders and project managers and project teams into kind of developing their own projects in a more sustainable and structured way. So we also have a team that does that, and then we have the internal communication team. So this is kind of an overview of how we're doing the day-to-day operation of managing the community.
So just for me to get this straight, you guys have pretty much a pool of talent where you go fish every time you have an announcement. So if a new project is looking for somebody to do copy or to type some code or whatever. You just state it in the daily announcements, and people will voluntarily join the project. So there's lots of cross-pollination almost, right? There's not one developer for one specific team.
No, exactly. And one, I mean, given that we're in this context, one of the interesting and kind of challenging things, but also very cool things, in my opinion, is the fact that people's availabilities change, people's commitment change. And I say this not in a bad way, but kind of, it just, I mean, life happens. Like, we were in lockdown, we're still in lockdown, but we might not be in lockdown in a week or so, and that will change people's availabilities most likely. People were unemployed and they found a job. People were kind of not working, but then their company adjusted to remote, so now they are more busy. So that makes that, for example, creates the context where one project might have kind of a very much evolving team over time. Typically, there's a core team that stays, people who are more committed, more available, etc. But the wider team is kind of fluctuates over time, and that's actually, I mean, it presents challenges, but it's quite good because you get a lot of different input from different people with different kind of experiences and skills and talents.
Yeah, that's something that I've always been wondering since I saw the inception of the project. It's pretty much an horizontal structure, so people do tend to feel some kind of ownership towards the project. Do you agree with this? Is this something that you feel from the voluntaries?
Yep. So the way that we are structured, and I'm actually happy that you brought the horizontal structure thing. So, I mean, we're all volunteers at the same kind of level, let's say. But still, there's like three groups of. I mean, there's always some kind of a natural a few groups of people, and I'd say that there's the group of volunteers who are giving out time and skills. I mean, everyone is giving out time and skills, but kind of to a specific project. There's a group of volunteers who are kind of supporting in managing the structure, the internal organization teams or the shared services team, whatever you want to call it, the ones I mentioned before. And then there's the coordination team, which is not a separate team, but basically we have a regular 3 times a week, we have an afternoon meeting where one team leader or a team leader or a project representative from each project that is officially supported by the movement, plus one representative from each of the internal organization teams are present in this coordination meeting, where we basically update and discuss strategic stuff, more operational stuff, but kind of just to have some glue to the whole movement, because this is kind of things are just happening on the go. We just need a lot of coordination to make sure that we can actually get the best of all projects and the best of this whole context.
Yeah, this goes towards something that I actually saw a webinar you did. I had to see it because it was for Startup Portugal, so it was not optional. But you did mention that functional is more important than perfect at this point. And I believe that it's really difficult to reach a perfect level when things are always changing, even with the pandemic, right? Right now, as you said, in a week time, we'll be not in lockdown probably. Do you feel like that has impacted the way people work for this movement? Are people slacking off already, or are they more committed?
I wouldn't say slacking off. I would say that there have been people who have been more worried than trying to push for more organization so that they are able to plan better and more. And yeah, so it's still, I think it's still too soon to see. I think that if we will only see the real effect of this once we're actually off of lockdown, because people are very immediate in reacting, and right now they think they still have time or whatever, or they're just putting in more time just because they think they will have less time in a week or so. To be honest, it's still early. It's still too soon to say if people will slack off, like you said. I would say that there will be, like I said, there will be fluctuations. And that is fine, and we will just have to manage that. We have a lot of volunteers, as you can imagine. Not all volunteers are allocated to specific projects. So there's still room to kind of allocate more and have second and third and fourth and 10th rounds of kind of teams for every project. So I'm just curious to see, to be honest.
Well, I mean, the curve is flattening in Portugal, so this is just a matter of psychology in the end. Are people as worried as they were when this all started? Because as we said in this conversation, Tech4Covid was prior to any government decision to actually tackle this, and we were talking about maybe this is a good time for you to talk about some of the solutions that like Tech4Covid created, because we're talking about it was a fundraiser to buy medical equipment, right?
So basically, and sorry to interrupt you, but kind of just to jump in there. So basically, I split the type of projects we have been kind of launching in two big segments, two categories. The ones that kind of try to mitigate, support, and solve immediate problems. And those are typically the health-related problems, let's say. And the ones who try and tackle more longer-term effects or mid-term effects. So I'd say that one of our first priorities was put a logistical operation to kind of import individual protection material, medical equipment from China, have a full logistic structure built there, liaise with government and our Air Force so that we could actually bring material, fundraise so that we could actually pay for that material, and then just get that going and deliver it to hospitals. So that's kind of one of the very first projects that we started. The second project, or I'm not sure if this is right, rank.
Just before you go, how much money did you guys ended up raising, and how did it translate to the support?
So at this point in time, we raised a bit over 200K, so 200,000 euros that were 100% spent in medical equipment, and we are still fundraising, and we should have. We have a pipeline of sponsors who are willing to donate. So we should be on track towards the 300K in the next couple of weeks, and 100% of that money. So we're not using any money in kind of administrative costs or any intermediary costs. We're just using 100% of the money for the actual medical equipment or some of the logistics associated to bringing it, travel, etc. But very much just kind of the whole money is coming. It's to put the equipment through to Portugal. So
it's more about the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that. So that China was kind of the first option. We're now actually already working with local factories in Portugal that reconverted into actually producing medical equipment according to like all of our sanitary legislation and all of that. So we're actually supporting some of those factories and industries in actually reconverting and actually giving them a pipeline that they can then kind of sell. We buy their equipment and we distribute through hospitals and kind of the medical system. So so that's the for the medical equipment specifically. So one of the other things I was mentioning, kind of the projects and kind of back to the more immediate ones. One of the other ones is we started with medical surveys and a version 0.0 of contact tracing, which is now evolving into a more kind of structured contact tracing approach. Now that there's European legislation on that, etc., that project is evolving into that. So, and that's what I call kind of more immediate. And now actually this project kind of moved into a more mid-long-term thing. One of the more immediate projects or issues is in Portugal, schools moved to remote learning from night to day, and the Portuguese educational system was simply not prepared for that structurally. So actually we were, as a country, I think we adapted super fast given the circumstances. But one of the key kind of pitfalls is basically students who don't have a laptop at home or an internet connection. So one of the projects that we launched, Student Keep, is basically collecting and buying equipment, also through donations, whether they're financial or the laptops themselves, and kind of redistributing them in contact with schools and government redistributing that equipment to students that don't have equipment. And that is also a very short-term need, because the school period is kind of ongoing and students need to kind of catch up and kind of keep present in schooling. So that would be for kind of the short-term kind of issues. We also have telemedicine, so kind of remote medical appointments. So there's a whole bunch of and all of these are either education related or health related. So those would be kind of the two most immediate challenges. And then we have a bunch of projects, and there's a few others for the short term, but we have also a bunch of projects for kind of the more longer term perspective. So one of them that is already ongoing is called Rooms Against COVID, and we basically, all of the short-term rentals, so the Airbnbs who have no tourism, we kind of made a little marketplace, created a little marketplace where those property owners can kind of submit their properties to become available for health professionals that cannot go home because they're quarantining, or because mostly because they quarantine and they have families at home who they don't want to kind of risk. So that's a short-term move into a long-term perspective as well. So then the other end that we have for kind of longer term is basically economy and local economy. So unemployed, any project related to unemployment, fixing unemployment, or kind of tackling unemployment, or kind of rebooting small businesses. And kind of the one that I probably would point out is called Preserve, which means to preserve. And essentially what that means is you can buy a voucher for your favorite restaurant, or your favorite hairdresser, or your favorite local shop, and basically give them money now so that you can keep them afloat and use that voucher later on. So it's a typical voucher type of thing. With no commissions, no profit, no margin associated to it. So we just basically circulate the voucher money to the local businesses.
Okay. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. One of them that I'm curious about is, I think Tech4Covid is not just a community of volunteers. If you have donation fundraising, it means that your community is much bigger than that. How do you engage with the community that it's not inside of the Slack channel, that is not in your newsletters? How do you reach out to them? How do you make sure they're contributing to what you guys are creating?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So I think that the main way, to be honest, is through all of the social media operation that we have, and through all of the kind of communication operation that we have. So we have an excellent communication team working with us. So we do a lot of kind of PR, social media. We have a lot of press coverage, and that by default covers a lot of our donors and covers a lot of kind of people who are in just around the community and the ecosystem, and who are part of the community by default. And then we have the more formal impact reports that I mentioned before, which is for us to kind of structurally show what we're doing and transparently show the results we've been having. But I'd say that, to be honest, there's no particular way with the donors. People who actually give a donation have their email goes directly to our communication channels, so they get impacted directly. But generally speaking, we just have a massive communication operation.
I think this is the part where we do something like a goodbye and take the opportunity to say that Portugal is incredible, right? I think according to OCDE, we're the most innovative country in solutions for the pandemic. Do you take some ownership on this? Do you think that was important?
Yeah, I have to leave my modesty away. And yes, actually, in that report from OCDE, Tech4Covid projects, we had a few of them mentioned. I think 3 of them mentioned in that report, and as one of the initiatives that has most impact. So yeah, I have to say yes, and I'm super happy and proud of that as well.
That's it.
All
I don't know if there's any more questions.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions, but if anyone does have any further questions, what you can do, this is an amazing platform. You can actually just click on João's name and send him a private message. If you have any additional questions after this, you can find them under the People tab on the right-hand side here. So if something pops up, you can send him a message. But thank you to you both. What an interesting presentation. And I just love the way that you are doing what you can to help with the situation right now. This is something that none of us thought really would get to this point, and now we're in it. I'm here in Madrid. We've been inside for 7 weeks now, and we're hoping at the weekend that we're going to get to go out and have a walk, because we're not allowed to do that. So yeah, it's a situation that we're learning every day on how to adapt and what will be the new normal after this. And yeah, it's, as you said, people may have more or less time to contribute. I said I've been working much more being at home, but who knows what the future could hold. So thank you so much. Please give once again a big virtual standing ovation to João and Andre. Thank you so much. And
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.